All right, well, welcome. So this will be an exciting session. And before we get started, I just wanted to thank our sponsors. For those of you that haven't been doing any events this week yet, cool thing about Denver Startup Week is it's the largest free convention like this in the world. And it's so cool seeing everyone back in person. My co-chair, who was helping with the product track, ran this through COVID all by himself and had never seen it live in person. And so seeing it come back and seeing the excitement around all the different sessions is great. As we mentioned, everything will be recorded, so this will be available for playback. So if you have folks that you want to send it to, that'd be great. And then just to let everyone know, I guess we do have another day tomorrow, and also the whole event is run by volunteers. So in the future, if any of you are interested, I know they're always anxious for more folks to help on different tracks. We had someone who presented on the design track yesterday, so all of that's great because the whole thing's put on by the community. In terms of dollars, thank you to Amazon, Capital One, Dell Technologies, and Downtown Denver Partnership, as well as a whole host of other companies here in Denver. It really can't happen without them. So, and you, for all of you showing up. So looking forward to this, and we'll go from there.
Great. Thanks so much. Do we know how many people we have for this startup week this week?
Oh, total attendees?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, it's been interesting, like how many people RSVP versus show up.
Yeah.
But I think it's been about a third of who thought they'd come.
Okay.
I don't know about prior years.
Yeah.
So,
Because we've had some years where it was like 15,000 or something.
Oh yeah,
so.
huge.
Yeah.
But it's building again.
Of course. Well, I'm really excited that we're in person again. So Denver Startup Week is one of my favorite weeks. It's a chance for inspiration, to meet new people, to connect with entrepreneurs in new ways. And I'm really excited about this session. So my name is Stephanie Clothier, and I am a director at Gary Community Ventures. I focus on little kids. So really anything from pregnancy through age 5 up to kindergarten. And we're really focused in our school readiness portfolio around early childhood development and school readiness. Just a second about Gary Community Ventures, and then I'll talk about our panel and what we're hoping to accomplish today. So Gary Community Ventures, for those of you who don't know, we really focus on bending the arc of opportunity for children and families. And we do that by focusing on school readiness, which I work on, youth success, and family economic mobility. We also use a lot of different tools. So we deploy philanthropy, which is one of the roles that I play. We also are impact investors. We do policy work. And we do some of our own building of ventures. And so our builds team is actually speaking right now in another venue. So we try to use sort of all the tools in our toolbox to be able to make change for children and families. This session is really a chance to celebrate Colorado. We want this to be a case study around how to think about public-private partnerships. We have an exciting new department to talk about, and we have 2 companies who are here who are really changing the face of how we think about technology and how that interacts with families. So just a little bit of background. The stakeholders across Colorado for the last couple of years have been really trying to think about our next big move in early childhood. And one of the things we did was focus on universal preschool, which was really led by the governor's office and the governor, who made a commitment to universal preschool. But at the same time as that ballot measure, back in 2020, ballot measure EE passed, we really started to think about much bigger system change. And so what's happened here, what happened back in May, was that the legislature passed legislation to create a new Department of Early Childhood. And that may seem like, oh, that might just be another bureaucracy or whatever, in the web of state government. But this is like a cabinet level agency dedicated to young children. Like, it's really incredibly exciting. This is hundreds of millions of dollars that this department administers, and hundreds of thousands of children that they get to work with and their families. And it's got incredible opportunities for innovation. So I'm super excited to have Dr. Lisa Roy here, who is the director of the Department of Early Childhood and is really she I think of as the person who has the biggest startup job in the country, really. This is just a massive undertaking. So I appreciate your time. I appreciate that you could be here and for the insights you're going to share with us. I wanted to just say a couple of things about the companies that are here, too. We have Jeannie Herbert from Bridge Care, and I just so appreciate the work that Bridge Care has done for the field. I don't know that when Jamie started the company, she thought she was really going to be focused on childcare, and being able to deliver a set of new products for families. Welcome. Come on up. We're a small group. We want to chat with you. And I, as the pandemic was going on, there was incredible needs in the early childhood sector, particularly in the childcare sector, to connect families with available childcare. And Bridge Care has been doing an amazing job across the country, and we've got some exciting things to say. She'll have some exciting things to say about the progress that they're making in product development. And then we have Saurabh Kamala Prakar. He is the CEO of Guardians Collective, and I have to say, it's one of my favorite strategies for connecting with families, and I can't wait for you to hear about it, because there's real magic here, and I think that what's also beautiful is that Saurabh, as the CEO, has been so thoughtful about what he's learning and what the company's learning about what works for families, and then building from there. And so as an innovator and someone who's really thinking about this generation of families, like where we are today and what they need, it's a really incredibly innovative approach to supporting families and really helping them sort of feel connected rather than in isolation, I would say. So I'm going to let the panel start now. So I want to just introduce them, though, a little bit further, and then I'll hand it over. So Dr. Lisa Roy is a longtime early childhood leader in Colorado. We're really so excited to have her at the helm of this department, because she has sort of all the experience you would want. Most recently, we stole her back from Nebraska. She was at the Buffett Early Childhood Institute at the University of Nebraska. But prior to that, she was involved in all kinds of early childhood education. So she ran early childhood education at Denver Public Schools. And prior to that, she worked for a number of foundations, both locally and nationally. She also was really part of the architect behind Denver preschool program. So philanthropy, program development, state policy, like everything. She's got the experience to do it. And so I just appreciate having you here. And I wanted to say just a note about our two other founders. Jamie has, I think, what I appreciate about you is your commitment to the childcare sector and to women who face barriers to having childcare, and your commitment to building the company that's going to make the most sense for children and families, and participating on the public side. And then Saurabh, I'm so glad you're in Colorado. When we first met, you were on that West Coast place, and I appreciate being able to have you here and thinking about children and families and how we innovate together. And his background is he has an amazing background of peer-to-peer education in countries that are recovering from conflict, like Afghanistan and East Africa, and countries in East Africa. So building from a wealth of experience there that I think makes him a great founder. So that's enough of me talking. Let's get to you all. I'm actually going to have Jamie start, if that's okay, because Lisa, I want you to actually have the final words around the insights from how these companies can work with the public sector. So Jamie, will you start and tell us a little bit about Bridge Care and your journey and how public-private partnerships have come about for you?
Yeah, sure. I'm Jamie Herbert, CEO and founder of Bridge Care. And at Bridge Care, our mission is to provide integrated, modern SaaS solutions to government agencies and local organizations, like here, the Early Childhood Councils and future local coordinating organizations for UPK, to support a well-funded, well-functioning early care and education ecosystem so families with young children can thrive. And we do that, like I said, through modern integrated SaaS solutions. A lot of times this ecosystem is very divided because of the way funding streams function. And so we often serve what that means is licensed childcare systems and public pre-K systems, and sometimes they're working together and often they're not. And we have a suite of tools that support their various different needs, but ideally trying to really streamline those systems to make life easier for families and the providers that serve them. And how we got here is a long, as any entrepreneur in the room would know, a long journey of, especially when you're dealing in a system as complex and needing of innovation as childcare and early child education. When we started Bridge Care in 2016, it was a very different landscape than it is today in terms of where there was opportunity for impact, particularly from the government perspective. There was just, it didn't feel like there was a lot of opportunity for for shifts and change and investment in early care and education at that time. So we actually started our journey with working with families and employers. Over the couple years, actually Gary Community Ventures brought us to Colorado with Jeffco Public Schools, initiating a pilot there. But we were pushing for pilots, and it was just hard to get the urgency and the funding and the there was a lot of interest, but not a lot of urgency around the kind of solutions that we had. And really that came from a lack of funding. An industry that's just been so kind of starved of funding to make those kind of infrastructure investments for so long. And for all the awfulness of the pandemic, it did create that opportunity to make those investments because childcare was seen as infrastructure and as critical, essential work and services. And so, somewhere around $50 billion got invested into the public sector to create that opportunity that opened the window for us to really do the work we wanted to do, but we're just having a really hard time making inroads in for so long. So from an entrepreneurial and product perspective, it's truly where, preparation, opportunity meet, and that moment to be right, to be able to take advantage of it. And within the first week of shutdowns, we were all in on that public sector path because that opportunity presented itself.
Can you just tell the audience where you are now, where you're working, which states and communities?
Yeah, so we're most excited, especially today, to be working with a new department, Dr. Lisa Roy's team, and also the OIT folks, Office of Information Technology and Digital Services team, who many of them are in the audience, to implement the universal pre-K system, which is new and very exciting that Steph had been talking about. So we're really excited about that opportunity, but we work across the country with local communities as well as states. We're in 9 different states and counting. And like I said, in licensed childcare and public pre-K systems, and coordinating between, ideally, as well. You gonna prompt her?
Yes.
Okay.
Let's go to, I can prompt. Mostly, I really want you to talk about your model and then reflections on how you think about public-private partnerships.
Cool. My name is Saurabh Kamla-Purkar. Went to school, studied computer science, engineering, education, got shipped off to Afghanistan during Obama 1, did a couple of tours, moved to UNICEF, UNHCR, did about 7-8 years total. Based out of Jordan, Congo, Syrian conflict is breaking out. But what I did in each one of these places was community-led education. What does education look and feel like in refugee camps when families are interchanging responsibility and trying to do something somewhat normal for each other? So what models of care, education come about organically in our smallest of communities? So Guardians Collective, I could go on and make it sound super complicated, but at the heart of it, we connect 4 families whose kids are born within 60 days of each other to an early childhood educator on text messages. It is a parenting group that's run by experienced teachers who've at least seen hundreds of kids over 8 to 10 years of their life. Every single day, the educator texts them, "What did little Johnny do today?" And the families will be like, "Today was horrible," or "Today was great," and broccoli was thrown on the floor for the 100th time. But the interesting part is that the pure aspect is the validation of experience, that this isn't just happening to you, this is happening to all of us. These things are meant to be hard, and you're doing absolutely fine. A Facebook group saying you're doing fine is a different story. A teacher with 10 years of experience telling that to you, gives you a little bit more energy to do something again tomorrow. So we started with about 30 families in Tenderloin in San Francisco. The whole thesis around early childhood education, particularly in ed tech, was low and middle income families don't pay for technology was what everybody kept saying. Based on my experience, it couldn't be further from the truth. Everybody wants best for their kids. Right now, if you want access to early childhood education, a full day program, a half day program, Head Start, these are your only avenues. But if you are a farm worker, which is a lot of our constituency, you don't want full day care. You still want to talk to a teacher, but you literally cannot unless you have some other format to do so. Started with about 30 families in 2019. We're approaching 7,000 this year, this quarter particularly. So most of our families are on Navajo Nation, Alaska, Oklahoma, literally middle of the country, and then farm working communities. So for folks that don't really, the 9 to 5 access issue is slightly more complicated for them. But also the brief of being a parent, I mean, we have a 4-month-old right now, has gotten significantly more complicated, right? It's a 24/7 job. Most of your most complex decisions take place at, right after bedtime when the kid's asleep and you're trying to think, what do I do with them next? So, instead of Google's algorithms and Facebook ads dictating what you do with your kids at home, why not give that agency to an early childhood educator to actually impact these decisions that are being made at home? So when the pandemic hit, half of this country got material on discipline. The other half of the country got material on how to learn a second language. And that was what we were seeing in our communities. It's like, who made this choice? This can't be the only way. So we work with about 210 educators all across the US. They take home between $600 to $800 a month, so that's extra income for them. And then families pay on a sliding scale, $10 to $30 a month. The most notable thing is it seems like a really, really small innovation, right? Like a text message software, we've had them for decades now, but it's literally reimagining that group chat space into something that becomes incredibly meaningful to families. So in a lot of ways, our product is shockingly simple, but the AI side of it is incredibly complicated. An example I often talk about is a family of a 2-year-old asks, how much should my 2-year-old be eating? First time question, very innocent, very normal. Educator gives the answer. In my experience, 1 snack here, 1 meal here. Somebody asks that question 2-3 times in the next couple of months. That's a sign of food insecurity. That's something else that's going on there. It's no longer the question of knowledge. It's about something else that's a nascent need. Often early signs of developmental delays come out every time this incident happens, little Johnny freaks out and we have a tantrum problem. So a lot of the things that become bigger problems for systems later on begin as a nagging feeling for families really early on. So our ability to spot these and our educators' experience to be able to see these early on allows us to say hey, you actually should get that checked out. This could become something significantly bigger, but the infrastructure side of that is really exciting work. We work with about 13 engineers, about to bring on a couple more linguists on staff as well. But what gets said is really exciting.
Could you say one more thing about one of my favorite parts of this model is the anonymity? Could you say something about that?
Oh yeah, so a couple things about group chat. We will not share families' information, race, zip code, which is proxy for race in a lot of these ways. Every group has families that are from different income groups in it, because we found out early on, the more diverse the discourse, the higher quality discourse we get. So the only thing we'll do is vet that these families actually have kids of that age, and then after that, the conversations are anonymous. But even one step beyond, they're language agnostic. So everybody will see the messages in their home language. So we've got families who are speaking Arabic at home interacting with families who might be speaking completely different language at home. And the translation's of course not perfect, but it's much better than the existing tools. So those are key features, but very, very important. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you. All right, so I'm going to move on to Dr. Roy to talk a little bit about the department, the job that's ahead of you and that you're in the middle of, a little about how you think about innovation and public-private partnerships as you think about the companies that are out there.
Absolutely. Thank you. I have tons of notes because when I found out when you work for the state and you're in a department, you get a communications person, and they want to make sure that you hit all the relevant points. But what I'd like to say is that I've worked in philanthropy, I've worked in private industry, and now this is probably my second or third role in government. I worked for the city and county of Denver, and I worked for a university in Nebraska. So there's always these intersections around public-private partnerships that lead the way to innovation. And I think it's important when I have had the pleasure of going to Gary Community Investments for some of the meetings over the years, is to individualize for a community. And so this concept around local community organizations, they need support. So some, like Denver, they've had the Denver preschool program up and running for 16 years. They've got pre-K down, but this universal application process that we're embarking on, that's something that would be new for the entire community, for the entire state in a sense. So when I think about what I am doing everything from ensuring that I am hiring the backbone staff. I am looking at our systems and structures. So I want to ask you guys a question. When do you think the last department in the state of Colorado was germinated or birthed? How many years ago was the last one? Prior to this department? 30 years ago. So can you imagine how much has changed as far as technology and everything else? Policies. And so here we're trying to stand up a new department, and we have to figure those, that we've got to untangle ourselves in some ways. We have to figure out, well, what are we going to use for our training, for HR systems, for everything. So that's what we're in the process of doing. And then I was fortunate. I mean, I came here from Nebraska while the folks in Colorado were working on some other systems in place for universal pre-K and this unified application process. So there's a lot swirling in the air. And a lot of times I describe it as, so you've heard of building the car while driving it and da-da-da-da-da. Well, I am building a jet plane while flying it because it's taken off. There's no stopping this thing. It's on high speed. And yet I have to put the systems and structures in place while there's a whole lot of expectations from everyone. And then there's tons of systems that impact families. So if you've ever heard of the Bronfenbrenner framework, if you haven't, I would say look it up. But everything from policy to funding to neighborhoods to there's so many things that impact a child's life. That's the point. So when we're thinking about just pre-K, there's the system of schools. There's the system of the various providers, center-based and home-based providers. There are parents. There are school boards. Because the schools are one thing. The school board's a whole nother thing, right? And then there's the health system that works with young children, mental health, you name it. So as you can imagine, I am getting calls from everyone about, have you thought about doing this? And have you thought about, so there's like 20 different ideas per day of this is something you could do to integrate, to make your programs and services more comprehensive, to make them more accessible. And you're making those decisions based on, I would say, your own lived experience, which I have, who gets to you, right, in a sense, and how many people are impacted by their advice. So school districts would be one example. They call me and they're like, well, you know, we're not happy about this and we expect this or that. But I have to think, okay, how many children are they going to serve? Quite a few. What are our expectations for them as a department and being a partner? And then what are some of those other partnerships that need to be a part of this to make this work? So the LCOs, our special education advocates and parents. So there's a whole array of people that we have to consider. So I think that that's an important part of thinking about public-private partnerships. Aren't just about you having an idea and someone else bringing money to the table. It's about all of the stakeholders that are involved and how you come up with solutions that work for them. So that's why I am excited to partner and figure out how we are going to have the best early childhood department in the country. There's only 8 of us. There's only 8, and we're one. And we have a governor who has me on his cabinet. What does that mean? I meet with him on a weekly basis, and he asks questions. He doesn't just say, you know,
Yeah, thanks for all the
yeah,
information.
yeah. I'm on to the next thing. I'm on to the, yeah. And exactly, he's like, what's going on? And I'm like, oh my gosh. So Mondays are intense. I look forward to being with the governor and being on the cabinet, but I have to be prepared because he asks questions. I call it 5
And
deep.
he's a tech entrepreneur.
Yeah, he's a tech entrepreneur. Yeah, and when I interviewed for my position, that was one of the things that they were like, this is the one thing that's going to keep us up at night. It's not the programs and services, 'cause we've been doing that since, I would say since kindergarten became a part of the school system. So we've got an idea of what is important in early childhood, but introducing technology and making sure it works at a statewide level is always a challenge. And our human services folks will nod their heads in agreement with that. I do have to say one thing before I forget, because it's at the bottom of my notes. This is for you guys on the camera too. If you are interested in helping the state launch universal preschool, we're hiring.
Yes, they are.
If you have a background in UX research, I don't know what that is, but you do, or design, please apply at colorado.gov / I guess it's not a slash, I don't know what that is, but digital service.
Yep.
Right? Okay. And then the department has partnered with Colorado Digital Service to deliver this important program. For all of the techies in the audience, check out some of our open roles, the same place. And then some of our partners from Colorado Digital Service are in the room, and so look for them. They're easy to track. They have on the hoodies with the CDS logo, and they're hiring for UX research and design to support this work. So thank you for that opportunity.
Absolutely. I wanted to actually just follow up on the digital services comment. So at Gary Community Ventures, we have spent quite a lot of time with the digital services team, and it's an incredibly innovative model to get tech talent into government and then really build the solutions that people need. And I just really appreciated the time, the talent, and the ways that you've approached both the RFP that was needed or the intent to negotiate and just how to get up to speed quickly in a very complicated department. That's included the human-centered design focus that's been a real top of mind. And then I think the joint ability to think about technology and policy together as this is like one of the hardest, I think, technology builds, because the policies hasn't even been written as you're trying to figure out the right moves for the technology. So just appreciate the team that's in the room and the work that they've been doing so far. So thank you. Okay. So I want to get a little bit deeper into the public-private partnership, because I think maybe I'll go to Jamie on sort of what this latest experience has been like, and your advice for product developers as they're thinking about approaching RFPs and and I think of like some of the contracts you've won, like Oregon is like one of the hottest in the country, and you've been in some of the other states that have local control, and that's also been, I think, a challenge. But just maybe reflections on that for people who are building products that they want to bring to government.
Yeah, since this was the product track, we thought there might be some entrepreneurs and some really like product focused folks in the room that might be interested in how do we even get there. I mean, I remember pre-pandemic we were like, government was a black box, RFPs are a black box. How do you get there? How do you make them innovate? It was just a lot of frustration and like a lack of understanding how to navigate it all. And over the past couple of years, we've learned a ton about what is intentional in RFPs, sometimes what's not necessarily intentional that gets into RFPs, and just how that kind of process works. But first of all, what really got us in any door at all was just starting at the local community level outside of state. So our first contract was not at all with the state, right? We started with local organizations, building the model, proving out the point. I mean, if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense that a state government would have a hard time pushing for really innovative new models because it's a lot of risk for them to take on. And so what we did instead was we started at the local level. So shout out to Larimer County, who was our very first client in Colorado, but also quickly after Jefferson County and Pueblo County, and then it's expanded to 40 plus counties in the state that are using bridge care at the local level with their early childhood councils and plus DPP, Denver Preschool Program. And so really proving out the model at the local level. And, you know, that was a bit risky. There were folks who were like, oh, is the state going to feel like we're competing with the softwares that they have? And are we okay doing that? We really had to find those local innovators who, and there was an opening in the pandemic once again, because they were like, look, state system isn't supporting the need in this community at this time in the pandemic. We need to do this. It can't wait. And so, you know, you look for the innovators, the folks who have a person who's like an advocate and a champion and going to make it happen. And that's at any level. That's in businesses, that's in state government, that's in local organizations. But the one who's going to just like seize the world, the problem and the solution the way you do, and going to like make it happen kind of regardless of the consequences in a way. And then start there and prove it out. And then you know, your early adopters, right? And then you have folks coming on as it becomes less and less risky because it's been proven out more and more. And I think that's really what got us to where we are here, but also in other places. Same thing in Texas. You know, our very first client in the public sector was a county called Tarrant County, where Fort Worth is, and a week later, the state of Texas followed on. So they just weren't going to be the first, right? So and now in retrospect, I get that, right? It was frustrating to me in the early days of like, oh, why won't states just they should have a better solution. This thing sucks, but it makes sense why it's hard for them to be the first. So having those proof points and helping support them to do the innovation that actually a lot of times they want to do internally, but just it's too much risk to take on themselves, was the way we kind of got there.
That's great. Thanks. And if you have questions about that, I'm sure we can follow up for sure. So Rob, could you reflect at all about how you've thought about what you're learning and how you might interact with the public sector?
Sure. I think like we took a really different approach given our product. Our thing was always, how small could we start and what could we show to the government if we were to ever land a meeting? Because in early days, that was not a guarantee at all, far from it. And I'll give you a story of two states, one of which I can't name because that didn't work out so well. The other one that did work out. But I think our strategy has always been, you know, start as small as you can. So we started with about 25 families in Pennsylvania, which ended up becoming 1,000 by a year and a half, like 15-month mark organically. So we were then able to go to them being like, hey, you've been trying to get parenting groups off the ground. Your average attendance with pizza in a library is 15%. Ours is 92 at the end of 1.5 year. Parents are happy to pay for this service, but we think you should be the one paying for it. And then we just like dropped off that material and left, and there was no RFP, there was like nothing, and we just got a contract for 1,000 families the following month, because it's like we're not going to be able to convince them to do something that they don't already want to do, and they cannot, quote unquote, take a risk on a new innovation unless we've got some local signs of success. The case where it didn't work out, they asked us to make new technology, particularly for that state, without any guarantee that there was going to be a bigger contract at the end of it. At that time, we were a team of 4 people. And I was like, no, we can't really build more software on this. And it still remains undone. Like they haven't found a new vendor. We haven't approached them again, but now we have about 3,000 families in their state. So at some point we will gather courage again and knock on the doors. But early on, I think like for a small company, so I mean, I don't know how you guys did it. It's really commendable, but like when you've got a team of 8-10 engineers and you're trying to get a scrappy product out, success is your best friend, even though if it's like a really small one, instead of going for a 6-month-long process that may or may not yield anything, and you may get paid on time, you may not, or like all these other things could happen. So like one of the biggest lessons for us is like, how small could we go? Turns out smaller the better. In terms of accurate lessons, I think one of the biggest thing for a product like ours is, what is the role of state in these conversations? And for families that have been low income and that have felt surveilled for a long time around these issues, if they find out that the government's reading their conversations, there's going to be no engagement. The product is dead on arrival. Like it's not going to go anywhere. But then we actually have the power to then push the state and ask, what do you really want to know from those conversations? So, very quickly you can understand that there are concerns around safety. They're probably trying to monitor and see if there's any duplication in wellness visits. It's like, what is the true root of your concern? The faster we can get to that, more easily we can draft an elegant solution, instead of the state saying, you need these 10 features, and we're like, okay, no, I think you actually only need 2 of these 10. How about we actually start doing that? And I think the biggest surprise to me has been like how open a lot of these states have been at these conversations, because they're also sitting on massive piles of data that they don't know what to do with, and like it just becomes a liability. You have to like secure this, make sure that it's like properly locked and encrypted and all these things. Eventually people are going to realize if you're not putting it to use, there's no point collecting it. And it's just like lesser actually might be better in this case.
That's really helpful. One of the things I think you had, one of the things that I sort of wonder about is when companies pitch us, they tend to focus on, we've got so many users, right? So you're the sort of pressure for you as a company is, let's just show scale, right? Regardless of whether it's particularly meaningful or whether you can say anything about impact or what you actually know about your users. So I would love to have you just reflect on that, because I think there's a lot of pressure to just get to scale quickly. And your ability to actually have really smart insights that isn't just about like, we've got some very surface level numbers that we can tell you, but they don't actually tell you anything about what,
I think
what the
like
product does.
for us, like the product as intimate as ours, our goal was to always demonstrate longevity of scale or longevity of engagement instead of thousands of users. Like in the grand scheme of things, 7,000 users is not that many, but $3 million of revenue is. So it's like, it's one of those things where if we can say we've retained families, about 92% of them, 2.5 years from inception, that certainly means something to the systems, because they're like, we don't want to just meet a family for 1 or 2 years, we want to see them from 0 to 4. So it's like, if your product can't even demonstrate that longevity of contact, everything else is meaningless to any of the systems. So the iterative thing around that was not around numbers, but how many days in a row were we able to show up, which is like really hard as a founder to do early on, because for the longest time we were still only talking about hundreds of users, and in grand scheme of things, 100 users is nothing, but then 100 users spending close to an hour every day for 2 years is that becomes serious business.
Yeah, exactly. That's great, thanks. So Dr. Roy, could you talk a little bit about what you're thinking about in terms of building a culture of innovation in the department, and any other thoughts around public-private partnerships that might be helpful to you?
Thank you. It's interesting because how many people know the story of Hot Cheetos? Hot Cheetos. So I don't remember the name of the gentleman's. Okay, but that's important. So my understanding, forgive me, I met this gentleman, but I don't remember his name, but he was a janitor for Frito-Lay. And Frito-Lay had a system set up to encourage their employees to submit ideas. And this gentleman and his wife worked on a recipe and, created a bag that they did the artwork for. And guess what? They made Frito-Lay billions of dollars. He ended up becoming a senior VP internationally. That was without a degree because this man had vision. And sometimes we don't listen to voices that could have a huge impact. And so my goal, first and foremost, is to try to create an environment where my staff, parents, our partners can bring innovation to light by letting us know these are some ways that we might do things differently. It is interesting. I was on the Welfare Reform Board for Denver County for many years. I don't think they'd mind me sharing this, but I remember we were looking at the effectiveness of some programs, and they were like, well, they must be effective because people are using them. But we didn't look at the outcomes. We didn't see what was changing as a result of them participating. And I think that that's an important part of this, too, is that we're going to continue as a government agency to look at what's working, what's effective for families, and not just saying we served 66,000 preschoolers. Well, what did we do to make sure that they had a quality experience? How did we engage with families? How did we change systems as a result of having universal preschool? So that's one thing I will say. I want to set up an opportunity for that. And I've already had staff just send me emails, about everything from the logo to you name it. And it's important to be accessible as a leader. And no, I can't take, 300 emails a day, but I am working with my staff around, hey, do you have an idea? I want you to write it down. I want you to tell me how we're going to fund it. And I want you to tell me what you think the impact is going to be, so that they are putting forth a proposal instead of just an idea. So that's another thing I'm working on. And then again, with partnerships, there's so much we have to do. So I can't even tell you because it's like you got to talk to our BITS director. You have to talk to we're hiring a chief administrative solutions officer. Those will be the folks that will have their ear to the ground more so on what we need as far as our processes. But there's always room for innovation in those ways too. Right now, if you know anything about education, but especially early childhood, tell me the demographic of the folks that are working in my office. What do you think? Are they male or female? Female. What race are they typically? White females. So 75% of my staff. Do you think that looks like, is the state of Colorado 75% white female, by the way? No? Are you serious? I wouldn't know that from my office, from my team. So our goal is to diversify, if not to look like the state of Colorado, that's goal number one, but to look more like the families and children that we work with too. So how do we get to a level playing ground where we actually shift things on its head around innovation and solutions and partnerships, that we actually have the folks who are impacted the most in seats of power. So that's what I'm working on. And if you can help with that, I welcome it.
That's fantastic. Okay, so I want to leave some time for questions from our audience, but I want to give one last question for you all, but I want you to answer it in like 2 sentences. So if you're successful with your startups, your companies, what will Colorado look like?
Sure. I think first-time parenthood shouldn't be so isolating, and the arbitrary boundaries between where the expertise of educators end and families begin should not be based on a place, but rather a true alliance in care.
I think it's pretty simple for families, and that's the idea, right? Making it simple for them to know where to go to get quality care and education all wrapped in one for their children 0 to 5. It's just easy. They don't have to think too hard about it.
Mine might be even easier. It's to fulfill those two goals. I think, again, the state of Colorado wants to be the best state in the country to raise a family. And there's a lot that goes into that. So from healthy births to having high quality, affordable childcare and or services that support a family, services that are accessible, so that one-stop shop is going to be critically important to us, so that, again, I don't have to apply for this for childcare, this for pre-K, this for housing, this for the, it's how do we make it so that if I put my name and information in, everything that I qualify for appears. And things change over time. Think about the pandemic. We had middle-income families that had never experienced this kind of stress before, needing mental health services, and they don't know where to go. So we want to make sure that this is a universal opportunity to support our families of children birth to 5. So if I ruled the world, which I rule a little part of it right now in the state of Colorado, we will make sure that families have what they need from day one to support the health and development of their children.
Great. Powerful stuff. Thank you all. So what I'd like to do now is open it up for questions, if any of you have them, or comments from the audience. Do you have one? Oh, good. Do you want me to give the mic to
I guess my question is more for the companies as founders. I assume whenever you're starting a company and you're looking for funding, you have to make compromises. And whenever you're trying to do something that has like a social good, I think that could be even more challenging. So if you could talk about some of the compromises you've had to make just to like be successful or prove your product, that would be really interesting for me to hear. Thank you.
I think like one of the things that we were trying to do early on is like just a philosophy around who are we going to work with. You're either early childhood educator, you've done this for at least 8 to 10 years, or you're an engineer that can ship a product by yourself. So no PMs, no support engineers. Like, can you open up a terminal window and hack out a piece of code? And those are the only two kinds of people that we decided to work with. And literally everything else, like we didn't have financial software. We used to operate out of Excel spreadsheets and coffee shops. Like all of those things are true. But one thing that I'll say is like, sometimes you really, really have to ship things before they're ready. Like Guardians Collective version 1 was WhatsApp groups when everybody was telling us nobody would pay for a WhatsApp group. And I was like, okay, let's try it for 7 days. Is there a really qualified teacher on your WhatsApp group? If there was one, you'd probably pay for it. So you can actually challenge your assumptions around what makes revenue really early on, even if it's $1. Like, just make $1 on the internet, like as an open challenge. And the longer that time is, the less viable your company is. Because in early days, survival is everything.
So this answer has changed for us over time because we started as a very different company than we are today. Actually, always in childcare, but not in what we do now in childcare. And yeah, so we did actually spend the first 4 years of our company trying to raise capital from more traditional and impact investors, and we're moderately successful a little bit in early stage capital. We did Techstars Impact Program. We did Gary Community Ventures got some grant funding, Pipeline Angels and Chloe Capital, some female founder type funding. But ultimately, who's to say the business model, the difficulty being a female founder raising capital, an industry that's serving children and women, which is underfunded overall, like challenges. It was very difficult. With this business model, we've actually been fully self-funded. So basically that money was gone anyway. We were about to have to raise, pandemic hit, we shifted business models, we've been fully revenue funded since. And we haven't had to, and it's been amazing. We haven't had to make compromises for investors. Because actually, I think a lot of what held us back from going even maybe more all in the public sector early on was that investors don't typically like GovTech. They don't like selling to governments. They don't like RFPs. They don't like having to respond to working through the Attorney General's office to get legal terms approved, which many folks in the room understand. It's all high risk. It's all long sales cycles. They just discourage it. And when you're chasing funding, a lot of times I think you don't go the path you want to, or the high impact path that you know in your kind of heart of hearts is the way to go, because investors are in my opinion, very groupthink, and they tend to just dislike things pretty wholly without really thinking through, is this the right path for impact here? And so what if it takes a long time? Maybe this could still be a really viable business, but also maybe venture isn't the right way for that business model. And so, for all those reasons, we've ended here, and it's been a really joy to work on this company, only serving our clients and not having to respond to what investors want us to do.
Okay, other questions? I don't know if did you have any remarks on that?
I was going to answer, but you had a question?
Yeah, I think I first have a comment and then a question. So, hello, can you hear me? Does that sound okay? Okay, good. I'm John Emerson. I work for a company called Primary.Health. I also have my own company. I've been multiple entrepreneur focused on healthcare. And so a lot of the same stories that I think both of you have been telling resonate with me. So I'll have a question to you, but first I just want to say, Dr. Roy, thank you very much today. I thought it was a great presentation, and I've worked in a lot of areas of healthcare, but I think the way that you described the state's initiative was very clarifying for me. So I've been here for a while. I've known about this initiative, et cetera, et cetera. Thank you for representing. I thought you did a great job. And I'm not just brown-nosing, I mean that. So for the entrepreneurs, I think that the key question that you guys both addressed that I want to mention, because the company I'm working with called Primary.Health also has worked with public health departments, major state public health departments. We do a lot in California, San Francisco based, so shout out to the Bay Area. But I think the key question is, you're in a state, let's say you have a strong state partner, you've gotten through that whole process to go from tiny to bigger and into the state. When you're going into your next state, and there's you have to start again with one county. And you're like, oh my gosh, okay, we've invested so much in getting where we are. Do we really have to start with some tiny city and county again? It's either that or you go after an RFP, and the RFP is asking for everything possible in the state that you don't necessarily offer. They're fishing. You know what they're fishing for. I'm guessing that you're at this level. We've been at the same level. You've gotten a few big state contracts, but then you're like, gosh, do I really need to start again? Any comments on that? Because, sometimes your states will pass you on, you'll get through. But sometimes you get passed to the wrong place, or the politics are different, or the way education is done in each state. Navigating that in every new state is just complicated. I wonder if you have any advice for the entrepreneurs out there.
Okay. I would say it's a bit of both. So your last point at the end there about how different each state is really kind of at the heart of why you do in a way have to start over each state, because especially actually even more so in the Department of Ed, but in Department of Early Childhood or whatever it is in that state, right? Human Services, workforce, right? It's a different makeup everywhere, but there are similar components, and you start to see the trends and understand it. But you do have to relearn the dynamics in each state. But you do not have to start mostly at the county level or city level. I think once you prove yourself out at the state level, other states see that and they look for models. In fact, they look at each other as RFPs. They look at where you've been success and what the statistics have been at that level. They look at, is a similar makeup to our state and how is it different? And to some extent, every state thinks they're unique, but also they do look for commonalities. And so it's not starting over, I would say, like from square one again, at least in our experience. And I would say probably in most cases, like the fact that we so early on got Texas, a statewide solution in Texas, we are literally find.childcare.texas.gov, and that's bridge care. And so that was a really big kind of like beachhead client for us to be able to say to others, oh, look, you can trust us. We've been able to do big things before, and you're trying to do big things here, and we're safe. So yeah, I would say that's my experience. A little bit of starting over, but not entirely.
So I've done investing in a different way in philanthropy as well. And one of the things that I always asked, whether it was there or running a school district department or in my role now, is I want people to know what is going on here. So we have people that will come and they haven't, and I'm not talking about you, but I'm just saying they haven't done the research. So they don't know who the state is partnered with, or how successful or not successful the partnerships are, and they're like, I'm here. I've got an idea, and it's like, wait a minute, wait. And so I've already had those kinds of conversations recently with some, it's like, oh, what you're doing is great, and guess what? We have had that going on here for 30 years, actually. So what is unique? And I said, can you tell me what's unique about what you do versus what we've had here already? And they couldn't tell me because they hadn't done the homework. So I said, why don't you call these folk, have a conversation, happy to reconnect with you, but I need you to tell me what you're bringing to the table that's unique. So I would say that. It was interesting. When you asked the question earlier, I know I was a little diffuse in my comment about what could be helpful, and I was looking through my notes again, and it's because we have so much going on. But what I would also say, and I advise people to do, is try to find out where the sweet spots are in early childhood that have not been addressed. So workforce is a big thing everywhere. If you can address our workforce issues, that's a big thing. That includes helping us recruit, retain, substitutes, helping with, we have our own state process for getting people credentialed as far as taking training and professional development coursework, but we're always looking to try to innovate that. So for instance, I was on a call, it's been a crazy 4 days, by the way. I was in Pueblo for a conference, and I think I've had back-to-back meetings to this one.
You know what day it is?
I don't know what day. I think it's Thursday, only because tomorrow's Friday. That's it. But I was, in conversation around just what our consistent conundrums are in early care and education, and it's those connections to the sectors. So today it was a conversation with a pediatrician who said, hey, pediatricians can help you. Well, I'm like, you can help me. You work for Denver Health, and you're already involved in a lot of systems already. But that might not be the case for a small town where the pediatrician might have a lot of connections, but can't actually do referral work because they have so much on their plate. They're the preacher and the doctor, and they own the store, and so asking them to do a same thing a doctor at a large health hospital, publicly funded health hospital would do might not be reasonable. But what are some systems that would serve both? And like I said, there's probably a million different conversations I had this week where people were trying to be solution oriented, and they are looking for ways that tech and other systems can intervene to assist us.
One sort of like entrepreneur hacky way I can answer your question in. Always get your customers to pitch a company. all of our initial pilots and stuff, we literally showed up with people who've been using our product in those meetings in their state, and that will always get you much further than any of that. It's like always show up with the customers, like let them do their talking and just get out of it as soon as possible. It'll really accelerate a lot of things.
That is key.
It's great advice.
And I think it's easy to forget too. Like, you've got customers and you're like, well, they have hassles, they have problems. Do I really want to ask them? And the answer is actually yes, and do a better job so they'll like you more, right? That's about it, really.
All right, well, we're getting to the top of the hour, so I just want to give a really big round of applause to our fabulous panel.
And our facilitator.
Thanks so much for being here. Love having all of you here and had this conversation, so thanks so much.